Hi, Celia.
Hello, Erin. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Not too shabby.
Yeah, I like this shirt. It's very topical.
Thank you, thank you. One of my favorite hoodies, actually. When I put the hood up, it's perfect for like blocking out the world. So it's great for focus. Yeah. Got questions.
Oh, well, we wanted to talk today about what biophysics is and what the program is. So I guess I can start that biophysics is an option in the physics department that allows you to combine many of the prerequisites you need for medical school, but also a lot of different biology courses into a physics degree to give you a comprehensive and broad basis for pretty much any science career or degree you'd like to pursue afterwards.
Yeah, that sounds accurate to me. When did you do biophysics?
So I guess I started the program in my second year, which was in 2002, and graduated in 2006. As part of my undergrad, I did the 16-month co-op option. So at the end of my third year, after doing 3 years of coursework, I then took a 16-month break to do co-op, which was fantastic because co-op is great. I mean, first, it's nice to have some money. That is a great thing after 3 years of living the student life to actually have some income.
Oh yeah.
And then the second thing that was great about it was, you learn so much information, finally able to really do something with everything that you learn. So I was really lucky to get co-op placements in an MRI research group here at UBC, and then the MRI group at Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto.
That's so cool.
I spent 8 months with each group, so it was nice having the really long co-op term because it meant that I could really integrate more into a group and take on larger projects. And yeah, it was a fantastic experience to understand that the biophysics program really gave me this broad exposure, this broad base. Pretty much you can count almost any science course towards the biophysics degree. And so having this really comprehensive broad basis, but also with a strong focus on physics, meant that I could contribute to these research groups that did magnetic resonance imaging, that did MRI. And that's how my career started. I'm still doing MRI today.
That's super cool, and also cool to hear from this end of things, just because I just graduated, so I'm just here with my fresh degree trying to figure out what to do next. I totally agree with what you said about co-op. I found that it provided a lot of context for what I was learning, and it made it lovely to see something that was just theory, to see how you can actually take this knowledge and run with it.
Yeah.
It takes it from the realm of just studying and a little bit of pain to creativity and exploration and just trying to take what you know and figure the rest out.
Yeah, and that, I think, I really like how you said figure the rest out. I think that why I was happy doing a program that was based in the physics department was I wanted to do a program that was about figuring things out. I was not interested in rote memorization. I wasn't interested in trying to understand a specific area of expertise. I really wanted to have an underlying set of tools that would help me to problem solve for pretty much anything in the future. So while we studied a lot of different science courses that gave us some background and context, the underlying physics degree basically taught us how to figure things out.
Yeah. I feel like my understanding of biophysics, because it does sometimes feel like a hodgepodge of different courses, is that you end up with a great understanding of biology as a topic of study, but then you end up with the tools of physics.
Yeah.
And so it's really, really good, for example, to prod things like protein folding using statistical mechanics, or to prod neurons and nerve transmission using E&M. It provides you with a really powerful way of analyzing things that enables you to get at the heart of the quantitative nature of the science.
Definitely, and actually from the point of view of MRI, it is an imaging technique which for a long time was considered more of a qualitative tool. And having the physics background and a physics research group here at UBC doing MRI, we've been pushing the boundaries of MRI to make it more quantitative. And one of the interesting things about the applications, for instance, from the field of MRI to medicine is moving from doing sort of snapshots of patients at different time points to actually doing true longitudinal tracking. So whether we're tracking a disease over time or tracking changes when someone started a new treatment, we want to have quantitative hard numbers to say this is getting better or this is getting worse. Perhaps we need to look at changing the plan for therapy. But previously, A lot of medicine is done in more of a, well, it looks like this or it looks like that. Like, no, we want quantitative numbers. How big are these lesions? How much myelin in the brain has changed over time? It's nice to have the tools to take this technique and make it more quantitative.
That sounds super cool, actually. How long have you been working with MRI, and how would you say that, like, would you say that biophysics has fed into that? Like, besides, you know, CoOp and the quantitative tools, like, how long have you been working with MRI?
So yeah, I got started working in MRI, doing my first co-op placement with Alex McKay here in the Department of Physics, and there's now, Alex has moved into retirement, so there's now a few MRI researchers, Shannon Colin, Corey Lala, and Alex Rauscher, Stefan Reinsberg, who all do, Piotr Kozlowski, who all do MRI research and are affiliated with the Department of Physics. So I did my first co-op with this group and learned about MRI. I then went on to do my honors thesis and my master's thesis also at this group, so that really gave me a solid foundation so that when I was ready to do something new, I had a very solid, comprehensive foundation that was built on the biophysics program, which fed into the Masters of Medical Physics beautifully. It was very well prepared for that. And then, so I did a master's in medical physics, and then I went on to do my PhD in Switzerland at the University of Bern and the ETH in Zurich. And yeah, it was awesome. And I got to join a very technical group there and learn more about MRI hardware and the components of the system. But what was very interesting is after that, I returned to UBC as a postdoc in neurology. So on one side, working with engineers, and then flip, working with clinicians. But having the basis of biophysics is really what gave me the tools to do that, because I can understand the technical components from a physics degree, but I can also talk the medical terms from my sort of pre-med component of my biophysics undergrad. So it really gave me that comprehensive tool. And specifically in MRI and probably most different types of medical imaging, you have to know a bit of every science, whether it's physics and math and computer science to work with the technology. You have to know a bit of chemistry and biology to understand what is the pathology we're trying to measure or look at with this imaging tool. And then, of course, you need to know how to publish in, you know, a clinical journal about multiple sclerosis or Huntington's or whatever the disease may be. You have to be able to talk about that disease in the terms that relate to that field. So yeah, it was the perfect background that got me there. And then more recently, I'm in a position that's called the Philips MR Clinical Scientist. So I'm in an industry-sponsored position where I make sure that all the research groups who are using our Philips MRI scanner are acquiring the best data to do their research questions. So I have to know about all of the technical details and specifics of our scanner. I also sometimes write new source code for the scanner called patches, and I patch the system to enable new functionality. But I also have to talk to clinicians. I work very closely with neurologists and psychiatrists to find out what are the research questions they need to answer. Why is it important for their patients? At the end of the day, what we want is new information or new clinical trials or new imaging protocols that are going to, at the end of the day, improve the lives of individual people. And to do that, I have to be able to speak their language of whatever the disease is that we're looking at. So yeah, it's a really fun career. It's very full on, being able to 1 hour talk about multiple sclerosis, the next hour talk about analog to digital converters. But you just do.
I mean, I guess if any program is going to prepare you for such a branching career path, it would be biophysics.
Yep.
But I guess if you don't want to go into medical physics or work with MRI, have you seen biophysics lead into like any other paths?
Yeah, so I graduated in 2006, and I'm still friends with a lot of my colleagues that I did through this program. It's a small, as you know, it's a small, close-knit program. You get to know the people. You figure out, well, if we're in quantum mechanics and animal physiology in the same term, well, you're probably in the same program. So we got to know each other well. A lot of my colleagues, or my peers who went through the program, actually went to medical school. So I have a lot of friends who are physicians now. Some people went into more like a teaching. Some people have gone more into like radiation physics, which is part of medical physics. And I have a friend who went on to economics afterwards.
Okay.
I mean, it's just, you get a bit of everything. So at least, I guess, I'm just guessing here, but the person that went on to economics, at least now they'd be able to investigate the economics of a very broad range of topics, having an undergrad in physics.
And I mean, with a physics undergrad, you end up with a really strong toolkit of things like math and comp sci. which you can apply to pretty much a really large slice of life in general. So even if you decide that pure science isn't for you, you can still branch out quite successfully.
Definitely.
And
Since we're talking about courses, maybe Suliat and I will mention, we'll admit, it's a tough program.
oh my goodness, just a heads up, if you're not strong at math, you can still do this, but be prepared to put in work.
Yeah, I was always absolutely middle of the pack in my physics and math classes. I was very much middle of the pack, but I just put in the work. And you know, we had great friends to put in the work with. So more hands carry the load.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna lie and say that it was all sunshine and roses, but at the end of the day, like, you end up with so many options. You end up with so many doors open that it becomes worth it.
When I was a student, I kept thinking, well, I'd rather be graduating in a class of one of 50 in the physics department versus one of 500 in the biology department. That's a lot of people to be in competition with, looking for the next career move. So with physics, you can definitely, with the biophysics background, you can definitely navigate into so many different, whether it's careers or next programs, graduate programs. You have a broad basis for making the next leap.
You're not even limited per se to medical fields. Like, I know people who have gone into comp sci, I know people who've gone into pure bio, I know people who were like, I don't like bio, and went into physics.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, definitely.
It worked. I know people who went into engineering. Like,
Yep.
whatever works. It's all about, at the end of the day, sometimes you're not going to remember every formula exactly, but you will remember what it takes to get to the answer.
Yeah, it was definitely, as we keep saying, like a toolkit for figuring things out. And as I think people are saying now, the careers of the next 50 years are not about learning something and then doing that thing. In my career, every single day there's something new and I have to figure something out. And having that confidence from spending 5 years of my undergrad, 4 years of courses, and
I did 2 years of co-op.
Oh, you did 2 years of co-op?
I
Cool.
extended it because I actually really liked co-op.
Yeah, it is. Co-op is great.
It was so nice not being broke. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But I think, the toolkit to be able to learn something new, to have enough of a background of a bit of everything, that you have a footing to learn something new, and the confidence that you're so used to learning something new as you've done it like every day for 6 years, that you just continue doing that. And whatever the career path is in the next 50 years, it's not going to be you learn this one thing and you keep doing that one thing. You're going to be in a career where you're learning something new every day, and to have the confidence and the comfort with doing that and going forward.
I'm just going to say that's actually personally very reassuring, because sometimes I see people who've specialized very intensely, and I get jealous. They have such incredible knowledge of their subject. So it's nice to hear that while that is valuable, it's also valuable to be able to just like look at something and be able to pivot between so many different styles of learning and knowledge and information in order to put together something that solves your problem.
Exactly.
That's personally very reassuring.
Yeah, it's just, that's every day. That's what I do. So it's good to be comfortable with that mindset, that frame of mind where, okay, I know this, I don't know that. Let's just find a way forward.
Well, to be honest, you've given me a lot to think about, and I'm sure you've given our viewers a lot to think about. Do you have any parting words, any wisdom that you can impart? I'm very, very thankful that was an option to do this program when I was in my undergrad, because I liked physics, but I can't say that I wanted it to be my entire world, and I've always had a big interest in medicine. There was a time where I thought about doing medical school, but I realized medical school wouldn't have been for me, because I really wanted to be a bit more of a specialist in one topic, and I wanted to be solving problems, I guess, my way. I wanted a little bit more control over my workspace. I mean, I guess you got it.
Yeah, I did, and I have a really fun career. It's very busy, but it's fun, a lot of fun. And actually, I have to say, most of the people that I've met through my career in biophysics and medical physics and then MRI, I've met such amazing, wonderful people. It's been such a collaborative environment that I've really enjoyed it, and that's why I keep coming back to UBC.
Solid. Well, I'm honestly really glad that you took the time to help and to answer some of these questions. You've got a really valuable perspective from both the side of academia and industry, and I hope that it's been helpful to you, like it's been helpful to me.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, Juliet, and thanks for organizing.
Hello, Carrie.
Hi, Juliet. So, hi, by the way, to those of you watching, welcome to UBC's Imagine Day. My name is Carriad. I'm a recent UBC Biophysics graduate. I graduated in 2021, so very recently.
She's also my friend.
Also her friend. And yeah, we're just talking about biophysics, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Out of curiosity, actually, what was something, like, what did you like the most about the program, and like, what didn't you like about it?
So the program specifically, what I liked about the program is that I felt like I still had access to a really wide range of courses and topics within both biology and physics that I don't think one really gets access to, either in terms of what you're kind of allowed to take and what you have the prerequisites for in just biology or just physics, but also in terms of what was accessible information to me personally. Going into a class, for example, a physics 405 class, which I think is the radiation biophysics, and knowing about the the intricacies of DNA replication and how double-stranded DNA breaks are repaired, or going into, I took a neurobiology course and knowing very specifically about the way that electricity propagates through neurons from a physics perspective. I think that both of those things were really helpful for me to have the foundation that I had in both biology and physics, that I think made me able to understand those at like a very more substantial level, I guess. And that's my favorite thing about the program itself. And my least favorite thing about the program, ironically, is probably also the breadth, because that is really challenging sometimes. I think it can be really, really challenging to kind of split focus in terms of trying to focus a lot on biology and then also physics and math. And I think when you're doing one area of study, like you're doing a lot of physics or a lot of math or a lot of biology, you sort of develop a rhythm, if you will, and a momentum in that way of studying and that way of learning and that way of thinking, which I think is difficult to do when you're trying to split focus between, for me at least, the way that I study for physics and math is quite different from the way that I study for biology. Yeah, so that was something that I found probably my least favorite thing about the program, and something that I found challenging. So actually, this is a good thing to bring up, because the way that I countered that is I lumped my physics and math courses together, and I front loaded a lot of my physics and math courses. So I took all of my third and fourth year required math and physics courses in my third year. And specifically, I did some of them over the summer and actually in second year too. So I really front-loaded my math and physics courses to really get that momentum going, which I think was a great decision for two reasons. One, like I said, the momentum and that fluidity in developing that way of thinking, and really having things that kind of were a little more synergetic in terms of the courses and cohesive information coming from different avenues, sort of all on the same topics. It was a smart decision because, one, I was able to really build that momentum and bolster that understanding from a lot of different avenues, a lot of different physics and math courses that were all happening at the same time. So there was a synergy to what I was learning and how I was learning it. And two, it was a great decision because when I applied and interviewed for co-op positions, I was eligible for some of the more niche pure physics positions that if I had followed just the regular biophysics structure of where the courses are kind of set to be taken in the degree, I wouldn't have had the right physics prereqs. So the example for that is I went to Germany and worked with the Max Planck Institute for 8 months, and that was a really amazing opportunity. I am so grateful that I got to go and do all of this really cool research. I got to go to Japan through the same co-op as well. And that was something that I only had access to because I had front-loaded my math and physics courses. And I didn't know that that would have been the case when I started doing that. I did it just because I thought it would be easier to kind of lump them together. So yeah, favorite thing about the program and least favorite thing about the program is really the breadth.
It sounds
Yeah.
like you managed to work around some of that by designing your degree almost.
Yeah.
And sort of taking it into your own hands.
Yeah, I did, and I think I was able to do that a bit more than I know some of my peers were doing that, because I actually transferred into biophysics a bit later, so I started off from physics. And yeah, I know we've talked about this a little bit, but for those of you at home, I started off in physics and decided to go into biophysics because I knew that I was interested in going into a more biology and more medical area of physics, but I found that I wasn't loving my biology courses at the same level that I was really enjoying my physics courses. Whereas my math and physics courses, I just felt really motivated and inspired by them because I loved that I'm not someone who I would consider as inherently good at math or physics. Like I think those are things that some people are just, they're very intuitive at that way of thinking and that way of learning, and that's not something that I personally have. Like I'm just not. I'm very dyslexic, and so that type of way of thinking doesn't come super naturally to me. But what I really loved about math and physics was that I found that the amount of energy and work that I put into studying and really trying to understand those topics and concepts was so directly proportional to the results that I was getting on the other side of it. Whereas I felt like some other things, like I came from an arts background. When I was younger and in high school, I was an artiste, and that was 100% what I was about. You couldn't get me to do math or physics.
Oh, that's
if you tried. Like it's a big running joke in my family that I ended up in physics because they're like, we couldn't get you to do physics and math in high school, and then you just did it. So life is funny that way. But I think that with arts, there's so much more. You kind of can't get around the talent piece of things. Whereas in physics and math, one of the reasons why I really love physics and math and everything is because to me it's so, the energy you put in is so directly proportional to what you get out. Or I guess the better way of phrasing that is what you get out, how good your understanding is, how well you do on tests or assignments or anything else. Even like your results in research are so directly proportional to the amount of time and energy and effort that you put in a way that I think is really unique in math and physics that I don't think is quite as common in some other areas. Like I think it's really amazing the amount that you can learn and kind of develop that intuition in physics and in math that doesn't happen as much in some other fields and areas. So that's actually why I ended up going into to physics and then specifically into biophysics, because I loved the application of physics and math and that way of thinking and that way of really trying to understand what's going on, what's happening at like a very fundamental level in a biology context. I just thought that was so interesting and so cool. And it like satisfies the little like 2-year-old in me that's just constantly asking like why? So I'm really a big fan of the field and the topics of study that are accessible through biophysics are also really incredible and very cool. So yeah.
It's cool that you come at this from sort of like an arts background too. Especially because, at least I've found, you actually do need quite a bit of creativity in research. It doesn't come across as a creative field, but you're not going to get anywhere if you can't think of things.
It's true. No, I totally think that, I think that the division between arts and sciences is really, it's like almost propaganda in my mind. I think it's such a false, I know, right? What?
Bold words.
No, but I do. I think that there's so much ego wrapped up in and I think it's a very false delineation between arts and sciences because there's such a huge overlap. There's so much creativity involved in both. And I think that having, you know, a strong like artistic or creative background, that kind of strong creative impulse is so beneficial. Like you say, it's so beneficial in research, it's so beneficial even in working through like a complicated problem set. If you can kind of take a step back and think in a more like abstract way, I think that's a really powerful tool to have. And then at the same time, if you're, you know, coming at a problem, like a more kind of creative problem, you know, research is a great example, but you're approaching it in a very like regimented, linear, logical, sequential way, then I think like the pairing of those two things is so powerful to come at a problem creatively, but to implement that solution in a very like rigorously scientific and orderly way is great. So, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Good coupling of skills.
To be fair, as much as sometimes biophysics can feel really random and it feels like everything is coming at you from different ends, it is good for getting you to think in that creative way, just because you're exposed to so many different styles of scientific thought.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
physics is so good at building that structured way of looking at things thoroughly, that it's really cool to kind of port that into bio.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's totally true what you said about learning about the different ways of approaching problems through like, you know, the examples of creative solutions I've seen in biology and solving biological questions and problems, as well as in physics. But I think that like there are some just like, I don't know, like jaw-dropping creative solutions and creative experiments that I've been presented through biology that physics is incredibly creative too, don't get me wrong, but that are just so ingenious. Like I think of like how they figured out like trafficking through the Golgi apparatus, which, yeah, like if you know the experiment, it's amazing. And I think you learn about it in second year biology.
Yeah,
Biology
second year cell bio.
200 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember learning about that and just being like, that is such an ingenious solution. And I think that like being exposed to those, because biology it's a different, like, you know, in physics we're sort of lucky because you're not really dealing with living things. You can kind of do whatever you want to them, right? Like you're like, oh, you know what, let's freeze this down to like 2 Kelvin, like, and see what happens, where you can't do that in biology because you don't want to kill the system.
Mm-hmm.
And so having to come at it from that really creative point of view, I think really only helps how one approaches physics problems too, because you can think about the constraints of the system that you're looking at. Because something that my old director at the Max Planck Institute used to say all the time is, he said, you know, we were studying solid state physics at a quantum level, and anytime you're looking at a system, anytime you want to observe something, you kick the system and the system reacts. And you think that you're seeing the reaction of the system as a true measurement of what the system really is, but in fact you're forgetting that you kicked it. And you see the reaction of you kicking it. And so always keeping that in mind, I think, is something that is easy to forget in physics, because you don't think of the thing, you don't think that you're kicking it. You're like, we're just probing, we're just looking. But of course things, you're probing, things are gonna respond. And I think that's something that biology has really like bolstered as a fact in my head, that I think is a really powerful thing to remember as a scientist.
Yeah. And it's also just useful coming into these things with the math background, the chem background, and the comp sci background too, because
Yeah,
it's a tool.
Take comp sci.
Take comp sci.
Ladies and gentlemen, take comp sci classes, like as electives, even if they don't count towards your graduation credits. It's so worth it.
They also added a scientific computing course to the biophysics in second year.
Oh, did they?
Yeah,
I wish they had done that for me.
Same, but
Yeah.
take more.
It's, you know, I think that like being a strong and proficient coder is never going to hurt you in any area, like not even just sciences. Like even if you do switch to something like social sciences, for example, you're still going to spend a huge amount of your time once you get to, you know, a higher level in your degree, like your 3rd or 4th year, if you start doing research, or if you do a master's or a PhD or anything, and you're doing research, you're gonna spend a lot of time debunking code. So you might as well get good at it now. And like, don't be afraid of it, because I was really afraid of coding and learning to code. I just thought it was so intimidating, because I came into the degree with absolutely no comp sci or computer science background. And like anything, it's the amount of time you put in, and that's what you get out, and you will learn how to do it. Yeah.
You actually mentioned your research at Max Planck quite a bit, and it sounds like it's been very heavily physics-y.
Yeah.
Have you continued on with heavy physics research moving forward? Like, how are you taking biophysics? Like, how do you see yourself taking this degree into the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the research I did at Max Planck, I was at the Max Planck Institute for the Chemical Physics of Solids in Dresden, Germany. And I was working on a solid state, in a solid state physics group on topological insulators. And so very, I know, weird words, right? But
cool words.
Cool words. Cool words, really, really interesting topic. Yeah, a lot like that, actually.
Yeah. As is most stuff.
Most research you get to and you're like, oh, I get why this is so weird. It's because literally we don't know the answer. Which is so cool and exciting, and just it's the reason that I love science and physics as much as I do. But I was doing some very, 100% solid state physics there. I went to Japan and was doing like 100% solid state physics and spectroscopy there. And then I went to, my second co-op was actually in Kelowna at UBCO, and I was working in a medical physics group, and we were looking at basically genetics. And so it was the genetic response to radiation treatments, and how do certain genes respond to being irradiated when the DNA is irradiated and everything. How does that govern, response to cancer treatments? And so that was something that was like a big jump over in terms of the research that I was doing. I've also done research in neuroscience, and that was my first experience. I was working with fruit flies, and we were looking at behavioral modification. So that was a very biology, Max Planck in Germany, and Japan, very physics, UBCO and Kelowna, kind of a medical physics, somewhat in between, probably a little more on the biology side, I'd say. If anything, kind of more of a bioinformatics piece. Than either really biology or physics, bioinformatics, kind of. There's a big Venn diagram overlap, but anyways. And then I did my undergraduate thesis at UBC with Carl Michael and Alexander McKay in, again, solid state, well, I guess solid state, soft matter physics. We were doing contrast development techniques for MRI. But I was working specifically with the NMR, the nuclear magnetic resonance piece of it, so not in the actual MRI context just yet. So that was kind of a step more towards the more physicsy side of things, but still with the obviously very biophysics, because we're looking at soft matter, we're looking at brain tissue, and how that, the different characteristics magnetically of it, and how we can use those to make MRI better. And then I recently did research with BC Cancer and Dr. Armin Rahmim in positron emission tomography, so PET imaging, and that was a much more coding than anything else. So there's really, I've been really lucky. I've had a really broad range of topics that I've done research in within physics and biology, and I've actually really chosen them in that way because I've really wanted to have that exposure to a lot of different areas within biology and physics to kind of narrow down what I really do like, and just because it's cool to have really broad exposure. And I think it's so fun and interesting to learn about new things and to have that really broad pool of experiences and approaches, and every little, every niche field within science, within physics, biophysics, biology, whatever, has a slightly different way of approaching a problem. And I think it's so wonderful and so exciting to realize that and get to learn that a little more, because I think that having that broader exposure just means that when you do come at a problem, a new problem, you have more kind of little variations of the way that you know they might be approached. And one of those is probably going to fit, I tell myself. I hope.
At a certain point, you make it work.
Yeah, you just go forward, boldly go forward.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you also asked what I'm doing with it now. So yeah, so now I'm doing, just starting a master's in physics at UBC, and I chose physics over medical physics because I knew that I wanted to stay within a biophysics realm, and the medical physics master's program at UBC is very, it's a CAMPEPA certified, so it's a program that really teaches you how to be a medical physicist in a very professional kind of hospital context, which is fantastic, phenomenal, and definitely something that I considered, but I feel I'm more interested in the kind of nitty-gritty lab stuff, and felt that doing a master's in physics gave me a lot more flexibility in terms of being able to really explore some areas of biophysics that are outside medical physics. So I'll be working with Dr. Sabrina Leslie, in lipid drug delivery systems, so similar to the COVID vaccine delivery system, specifically with like mRNA vaccines and how those can be used, how mRNA and lipid delivered drug systems can be used in different contexts, and how we should understand and be studying those in a physics and biophysics context, which I think is really cool and not something that I, at the start of my degree, would have thought would be a biophysics thing, but there really is. I think any problem in biology can be approached from a biophysics perspective. So that's what I'm doing now, or will be starting in September.
Which I think is super cool.
Super cool.
It's cool to realize that though you do have a lot of options for people who want to go into like medical side of things, biophysics is great prep for that. But you have other options besides the medical route. You can look at the biophysics of the physics of biology and life and ecology, and there's a lot of modeling in, for example, disease spreading.
Yes,
ecology
absolutely. Yeah.
Everything really.
Yeah, no, and I think that medical physics is such a a directly human application of biophysics. It makes a lot of sense. I think it's sort of the most obvious thing that you would think of, and it's definitely the example that's the easiest to kind of explain, where you're like, well, if you've ever had a X-ray, a CT scan, an MRI, a PET imaging, like anything like that, there's a lot of biophysics that comes into it. But biophysics really is so broad. Like I have other friends in biophysics who've gone into, hardcore neuroscience and are looking at very niche and specific things in that area, or like you going into biomedical engineering.
Yeah.
And
decided to do a little swerve into engineering there.
But that's really common too. And like you say, like the disease modeling is huge. I think I know someone who went from biophysics into atmospheric sciences, which it sounds kind of like you might not necessarily connect those two, but it actually makes a lot of sense as well.
I know someone who was torn between working with neuronal neuroscience, but not so much like the brain, but more like the cell bio of neurons, and working in Antarctica with like oceanic sciences. So like biophysics as well.
Yeah. There are a lot of people who go from biophysics to medical school too, though.
Yeah.
Like I know I interviewed for medical school this year. I was waitlisted. I didn't get in, and that's totally fine. I'm really excited to be doing my master's, but I think like someone had told me before that roughly half of biophysics graduates end up going into medicine.
That sounds accurate.
Yeah, from what I can think, and at the same time, not everyone in biophysics does apply to medical school, so it is also a really great route for that if that's something that you're interested in.
It's a great route for if you like exploring. Like if you want to do med, it's still an option, but it's also good to figure out if you don't particularly want to do med, or you don't know what you want to do. You end up with so much exposure and so many options for exposure to different fields that if you want to do med, you have the rigor and the background and the ability to teach yourself to go into med. And if you decide you don't want to go into med, you have the background to go elsewhere.
Yeah, that was one thing that I thought was really cool about the biophysics program is you have so much exposure to so many different things. Like I really feel, and I think that like my co-op experiences are very, yeah, do co-op.
Do
like
co-op.
everyone told me to do co-op and I was kind of like, oh, is it really worth adding an extra year to my degree? Like,
100%.
My favorite experience from my whole degree has been co-op, and
co-op has been the best part of this degree for me, at least personally.
Yeah, we both went abroad.
Yeah.
So, and that was great because like, you know,
It's cool.
it's super fun to live in another country and be able to experience another culture and language. And I got to travel around Europe a lot and Japan a bit while I was there, and I am so grateful because I don't know if I would have been able to really afford that otherwise.
Once again, co-op is great for not being broke.
Yeah, really good for that. But it really does expose you with biophysics to so many different things, and I feel like I was saying, I think that my co-op experiences are kind of indicative of just how many doors are open to you from biophysics. Like I was a little worried going into biophysics that, oh, is it just going to be medical physics? Is it just going to be protein folding? And the answer is no. You can really go into pretty much any field, and even if there are things that aren't directly accessible to you, like maybe you don't have that particular physics course, you don't have that particular physics background or that background in math, take an extra course, you know?
Or learn it on the fly.
Learn it on the fly. There's tons of things that I think I've learned on the fly that like, I mean, granted though, like with co-op, like there's nothing that really prepares you for realizing that you don't know something, and that's really a wonderful realization to have too. And also to have the realization that like, oh, I really don't know this, and that's okay, because even if I had done a pure physics honors degree, I wouldn't know it anyways. But I can learn it.
Yeah.
And I think that that sense of self-efficacy is a really wonderful thing to get from, you'll get it in physics too, but biophysics is great for it as well. But it's just a good thing. Just a good thing to have, that feeling of self-efficacy.
That feeling of having learned something and being able to do something.
And that belief that you can.
Yeah.
You know, I might not, and that's okay, but I know that I can learn it. It's super powerful.
It's also nice for when you end up in those moments where you have imposter syndrome or you just doubt yourself. It's nice to have evidence that you've done it before. You've done it before, you can do it again.
Yeah, that's very true. That's really true.
Biophysics is like that too, where because the structure is, once again, kind of like an explosion, you know that you can pivot really, really quickly if need be.
Yeah, I think so. And I think I think you can pivot to so many different things as well. Like, I know you and I have both stayed in kind of a more physics/biophysics like niche of what we've decided to go into and what we've chosen for our co-ops or our thesis projects, or NSERC, undergraduate research projects and everything. But I know people who've gone into more of like the chemistry piece of things, and that's really accessible too. And so knowing that you can pivot and that you have the background, maybe not the most substantial background, but enough background to be able to pivot and make that next step and get to where you need to be, is something that biophysics is really good for.
Alrighty. Anything else that you want to impart?
I don't think so. Do co-op.
Yep.
Take all of your electives, like take all of your fun arts electives in things that are just cool and interesting. Like there are some really, really cool art elective courses at UBC. There's like an Iranian film course. There's like, just explore. Take your electives and explore. And the same with the bio electives in the degree. I will say that there are certain courses that are advantageous to have, like the second year genetics is a really useful course for opening up doors later in your biophysics degree if you want. If there's certain courses that you are interested in taking in biophysics, I would totally suggest looking ahead in your undergrad and saying, okay, maybe I need this as a prerequisite, that's worth me taking. But also like the neurobiology course that I took, I didn't have the prereq for, I just emailed the professor and he said, okay, your grades look good enough that I believe you can do it, and I did. So that's something that is a good thing to do too. That typically aren't things that are super off limits, but definitely worth maybe if you have an idea of things that you'd like to explore, looking ahead just a little bit and making sure that you can fit those prereqs in if you need to. Do a coding class, 100% do a coding class. You know, either in, I think the comp sci ones are probably better for actually learning those skills of how to code, but the is Physics 210, the computational physics course, is also really good. That's the one that I did. Yeah, have fun, explore, try lots of things, try lots of different faculties and departments. There's, you know, so many things that are available to you, and I'm always going to say also, like, do research. Research makes everything in science makes so much more sense. It really gives a context to everything you're learning, and I think it really gives a more substantial appreciation of why we do what we do and just how incredibly clever and ingenious and, you know, substantial some of these really big deal discoveries and big deal theorems and everything are. So that's, I think that's all my advice.
Yeah.
Have fun, you know.
It's tough, you'll do it, you can do it. If you believe in yourself and you truly want it, you can do it.
I think that with everything and really anything. And you know, like, I know I had such a huge imposter syndrome going into physics and biophysics, and I think like so many people are in the same boat. I think I really haven't met anyone in my physics degree who came in with 100% self-assurance, and even people I know who like really presented that way, I think when I got to know them a bit more, like they also had some imposter syndrome. I think that's really normal and natural, and I think the best thing to do to like counteract that is to just really put the work in. And you know, if you are organized and can have the time to pre-reading in certain classes is a great thing to do.
Yeah.
Like physics is at 301, the E&M class, electricity and magnetism, pre-read in that one, pre-reading your quantum classes.
Yeah. Go to office hours.
Office hours. Do the homework, really do it. And yeah, I think like, you know, slowly but surely you have those little wins, those little, oh, I did well on this homework, or I did well on that quiz, and building that self-assurance. But it really just is, you know, it's the reason that I still love physics as much as I do, is because what you put in is exactly what you'll end up getting out. There's no magic, there's no mystery, there's no secret equation. It's really one-to-one, and I think that that's a really great thing.
I think that's a lovely note to end on.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you for your time, Kira, yeah?
No worries.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching.
Honestly, you've given me some great things to think about.
Yeah, hope that answers some questions and gives you lots to think about. And you know, the biophysics community at UBC is really great. It's pretty broad and wide-reaching, and there's some really cool stuff happening at UBC and in Canada and around the world. So
Yeah.
it's a really fun and inspiring field to be in, I think.
Oh yeah. Alrighty, well, thank you.
Bye.
All the best.